I honestly don't know how to go about doing a Rogue One review the way I want to talk about it without spoilers, so I'm not even going to bother trying to do a spoiler-free review that probably would have just sucked anyway. Obviously, this review will contain spoilers, so I highly recommend you go and see Rogue One before you watch this. There's your warning. Let's do this. And where to even start? Rogue One felt to me like it should be described as somewhat of a different kind of Star Wars film, and not just in the sense that it's apart from the main saga of films, but in the overall feel of the movie. Things like little titles popping up to tell us what planet a ship is landing on, or the obvious abundance of death in so many scenes, are big parts of what made this feel distinctly different from those main saga films. And it was a bit weird to me at first, but really that's what these standalone stories should be. Venture off, do new things, and explore new parts of this universe that audiences aren't familiar with yet on the big screen. Even though Rogue One did take place in a familiar part of the timeline with somewhat familiar villains, it still had a very distinctly different feel from the other Star Wars movies within this part of the timeline. I'm sure you've already heard it said before, so forgive me for saying it again, but Rogue One really is, at its core, a war movie. There's a lot of terrible things going on, a struggle between good and evil, and a lot of moral gray area that even the good guys involved don't really feel good about. And wound up with all of that is a movie trying to tell a story that we all sort of know the outcome of already, but still managed to be thrilling throughout the entire thing. Just to come right out with the honesty, I really enjoyed Rogue One. It was full of intense moments, had a lot of interesting characters, some of whom had unclear motivations, and in the end, a lot of emotion with it all. Diving especially deep into spoiler territory here, I love that we got to see each of these characters' introduction and conclusion to this story. Nothing was left open-ended. And as much as it hurt to see each one of them go, it came with this comforting sense of resolution that they had given all that they could and done what they needed to do for the sake of this mission, and it made me love each of their characters that much more because of it. I'll also say that there are parts of this movie that are very much tailored to the most hardcore of Star Wars fans. Things like little winks and nods to other parts of the current Star Wars canon that you would really have to be up to speed on to understand, and in a way it felt like sort of a reward for being up to speed on those things. For those that have read Catalyst, the novel that's essentially a prequel to Rogue One, the entire opening scene of this movie will make that much more sense. For people that watch Star Wars Rebels, you're going to see things like Chopper, or at least who people think was Chopper, meandering around the Rebel base. You'll spot the Ghost very briefly, and you'll hear somebody paging Captain Syndulla on the base at Yavin 4. We even have a cameo from the guys in the Mos Eisley Cantina who try to rough up Luke and Obi-Wan and end up losing an arm because of it. With all those nods to hardcore fans, the positive reception to this movie despite the fate of all the main characters, and the different areas of the Star Wars universe that have been explored in this movie, this should serve as perfect examples to Disney as to just how much there is out there that they can explore and should explore within the Star Wars universe. Now, for as much as I did enjoy a whole lot about Rogue One, this is still a review, and there are some things within this movie worthy of criticism. The first thing would be that the entire first act of this movie feels a little bit too jumbled and jumping around to different places and different time periods for only brief moments, to where the pacing in general of that all, it just kind of felt off in a big way. Basically, the flow to it all was pretty rocky at times, and I think they definitely could have smoothed that out a lot more than they did. The movie's score was another part that was kind of hit and miss in my book. At times, the score was great and fit the emotions of the scene perfectly, but at other times the score just felt really off and awkward. Kind of makes you appreciate just how gifted John Williams has been at scoring these Star Wars movies. Lastly, while I know it's fairly common for just about any movie to have little things thrown in there just for the sake of heightening dramatics, I felt like there was a few in there in Rogue One that were a little bit superfluous, or at the very least just kind of forced in there. Star Wars movies in general have always had little things like this that seem to go a little bit against common sense or consistency, and this was definitely no exception. In other words, they were little bits of drama that were just not very well written. Those are my big three complaints with this movie, and while they certainly shouldn't be discounted, they are also certainly not nearly big enough flaws to say that Rogue One was anything other than a really, really good movie. I've gone to see it twice now, and I can say that on both viewings, I had the same questionable feelings towards a lot of the first act. But along with that, I had a lot of the same deep emotions felt towards the climax of it all. Despite knowing that it was coming, seeing the end of the road for these characters even the second time around still hit me hard emotionally, and I think that's absolutely a byproduct of how likable these characters were, some of them even in just limited roles. Rogue One took a step in a different direction to explore different places and different people within the Star Wars universe that we weren't previously familiar with, and along the way, maybe the most important thing is it gave deeper meaning to all of the events surrounding both Episode 4 and the entire original trilogy. The scale of it all is enhanced that much more while absolutely nothing was taken away, and if you can add value to already existing films while telling new and engaging stories along the way, then you have the makings for an absolute juggernaut of a cinematic universe on your hands. I've seen a lot of people already comparing Rogue One to The Force Awakens and saying which one they like more, and for me, it's honestly tough to say. I really enjoyed both of these movies. And regardless of which one you actually like more, maybe the biggest thing to me is that this is now 2 major steps in the right direction for Lucasfilm ever since Disney took over. And if Star Wars movies continue to even be just as good as The Force Awakens and Rogue One already have been, that is more than good enough for me. Anyway, that is my thoughts on Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. Obviously, I probably could say a lot more about this movie and what I think it means for the franchise as a whole, but that's probably a different video for a different day. In the meantime, let me know in the comments what you thought about Rogue One, particularly about what was your favorite Easter egg from the rest of the Star Wars universe that they kind of slipped into this movie. Also, please be sure to hit this with a like button. I always appreciate that. But above all else, everybody, thank you so much for watching.